within each of us is this integrative healing nature, and we're just trying to figure out what what will help that wild animal come out of the cave, and so that's what we're looking for is what are the conditions that call forth that healing.
What if I told you that healing doesn't happen by chance? That
I
our
like it.
bodies are
I
created
like
to
it.
heal itself, our bodies, not just from small wounds. I grew up in a rough neighborhood, so you would cut yourself and you wrap it up and go back outside, right? And you don't want it to get infected, so you had to cover it up and all these little things. And then the healing would happen, and the scab would come, all of these layers and layers and layers of things. But when it comes to emotional healing, we don't see it the same way because we can't see we can't measure the wound, can't measure the process. We can't stop sometimes the impressions that the memories bring as if we were living it over and over and over again. For small business owners, it could be a deal that took place, like a decision that you made, laying off people or not being able to make payroll during Christmas. All the little things that happens to help us to induce trauma mentally to ourselves, cause us to question ourselves and doubt ourselves, and maybe even cause us to wonder if healing is really, really possible. But this conversation today will show you that not only is healing possible, healing is within, and healing comes from within, whether it's the cut from on the knee or a cut to the heart. My name is NaRon Tillman. This is Walk in Victory, where we sit you at the feet of the masters and we have conversations to help you evolve your life. Today's master, Steve, is going to help us as we talk about organic intelligence. How are you, sir?
Man, thank you so much. It's so nice to think of that in this day and age, we know that the master lives within, and
Yes.
I'm delighted to be able to have that conversation together. Thank you so much.
Well, I teach mindfulness, yoga, meditation, and all of these other spiritual healing, yada, 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 which has been around for the ages. But what neuroscience has been able to uncover in the last several years has really moved the lens forward because it merges both science and spirituality in a way where we are now measuring brain activities, and we have to go back and say you can actually change your brain, right? You can actually change your path. What are you doing, and how are you throwing your hat in the ring to the world?
Well, the hat I wear is called organic intelligence, and that kind of says it all, It just says that just what you were saying, that within each of us is this integrative healing nature, and we're just trying to figure out what what will help that wild animal come out of the cave, and so that's what we're looking for is what are the conditions that call forth that healing. And I just think it's the thing that we're throwing the hat in the ring about is that I don't think it's the way that has been taught mostly these days. And so that's what I'm looking at is that it's a kinder, it's a more compassionate and even loving approach for ourselves that is healing. That we're not talking about dragging ourselves through our past history, but that in each moment healing is being offered, and we just practice recognizing that and just taking little sips of that healing.
Well, healing is a process, right? And we all know that. The difference, let's look at the difference between like having a something happen in the physical body and having something that happen that traumatizes the subconscious mind. The process of getting over it takes longer. Why?
Yeah, because just like you said, we can't see it, and also because we've been told that it is related to like a past event, but by the time we get to it, It's exactly that. It's past. How it lives is in the traces in our own physiology, in our neurobiology. It's still there. Every thought, is a neurochemical event. And so it's ultimately it all boils right down to how it lives in the body, how it lives in the biology. And we help people learn the language of that biology so they get to have that conversation.
What are some of the love language models that we need to have with ourselves?
Oh, just first of all, let it be a love language. Let it be that. We probably all have come through this world not being spoken to kindly, not have been treated kindly. Maybe, everybody is out there doing the best they can, but we end up with, the scars of the language that hasn't necessarily been very loving. So just starting with a love language to think that, yes, let it be like that. And it doesn't have to be tough love. It can just be kind love. It can just be gentleness and tenderness. And I think that's what is coming through to us all the time is that there are little messages, some would say a still small voice that comes and is whispering a different message of love and care to ourselves that we actually need some help in hearing. And that's what we hope to do.
S- So we know that the brain, in science, they call negative bias. In church, they call it sin, right? We lean we lean towards these negatives. What are some of the exercises or some of the things that you techniques that you help people to build positive biases instead of holding on to those negative biases, but now looking at their day and building a positive bias or starting their day off with positive conversations with themselves? Because a lot of the a lot of the pain, although it may be an event that causes the pain, a lot of the reinforcement of that pain comes from us.
Yes. Just accidentally and thank you again for the question. The question comes from a profound learning and love itself. So thank you for that. But the first thing that I would do is a little bit different from what we think because we go, okay, we got this negativity bias. So most people think they've got to replace that with a positivity bias. That's not entirely wrong, but there is something else. And that something else is to bring in the connection to the environment through the senses. As part of the reason we're being swept by the winds of pain, by the winds of our past, by the winds of culture, all of this is coming because we are untethered from the here and now. And I think that the way that we connect to the here and now is through our senses. We could say we begin our healing journey by coming back to our senses, but that's literal, like seeing and hearing. And so we start with that we do this thing called orientation, which is we connect to the environment through our senses. So I'm just mindfully seeing and hearing or feeling, the tactile touch. And that begins to tether us into something else that's real and that's non-threatening compared to like what's often going on in my mind, which is the rehearsal of what's been wrong and how I've been wronged.
It's funny that you would say that. Me growing up Christian and having a Christian background, preaching for some years, it wasn't until I got into the study of mindfulness and yoga that I I look now even at my narrative of creation, how we're all a part of this. We've been tricked to look at humans outside of creation, where
Yeah.
there's plenty of healing about seeing ourselves as a fabric of creation, but not just seeing ourselves as a fabric of creation, participating in creation. I don't hug trees, but I'll walk with barefoot through the grass. I'll listen when I'm one of the meditation practices that I do help guide people in. It's let's go to a noisy place. and let's focus in on the banging of the pots, the the rustling of the train, right? And close your eyes and see how those sensations make you feel. Because instead of being agitated by it, you can't change. The train is going to come. So how can I embrace those things? Why do you think that we have, and even in some of our religious studies, separated ourselves from creation when there's such a healing mechanism in all of the things that surround us?
That's really biblical, isn't it? Made in the image of God, right?
Well,
The original blessing, we would say, is still there. And I think the reason that we fall off, there are a bunch of reasons. One is that I think we're so far off of our original kind of living. We're
mm,
living in a box. Right now I'm in a room. It's basically a box, and I've got electric lights. We talk about the nature of biological synchrony.
I
And so,
mean,
like, for instance, one of the treatments for insomnia is camping, like getting out and away from electric lights that are like these suns that come up at any time of the night. And we're meant to be synced into the rhythms of nature, especially with the rising and setting of the sun. We're not nocturnal, so our systems are designed to kind of be more alert during the day and then come down during the night. And that rhythm of up and down is a basic rhythm of our well-being. And when we're out of sync, we're out of whack, we are out of tune, and then we are, struggling and suffering. I think that's a big part of it.
I'm glad that you said that, because when we look at the archaic self, formal, like they relied on the sun. They relied on gut feeling. They relied on their instincts. They relied on all of these things for survival. And the further we get away from, we isolate ourselves from the sun. We isolate ourselves from the heat. We need GPS to give us direction. We are really stripping away the instincts that we were born with. How do we tap into that again?
Good. Well, one of the ways is that orientation thing. That is, we just keep on sending that attention outward. The interior is this echo chamber of my problems. And I think like, why did they say that? And then I begin to feel the sensation of like tension in my jaw and this constriction in my chest area. And then I begin to think about what I might do. And I imagine, getting revenge and all of that stuff. That's just the internal world just bouncing off itself like some bumper pool sort of thing. The thoughts bounce off the ideas, and the ideas bounce off the sensations, and they go on to the feelings, and it's just this internal world of what's wrong. It's the house of mirrors. And instead, we can get connected to a moment of reality when I see outside. I see a tree and I see a bird and I hear the bird song, or I hear the train. I sense, the roughness of the cement or the door handle. There is contact with reality that's relatively neutral, that gives us a starting point of what in meditation would be called something of neutrality or equanimity. Non-attachment in a way. It's just
Mhm.
simple. All right, it's a tree. It's concrete. It's the sound. It's no big deal. And being able to connect at that level of the senses gives us a little toehold into reality where I'm not always assaulted by this house of mirrors of what's wrong.
And when we go from this non-attachment, and then do we move to non-judgment? Is that the
Let's
next?
do that. Yes, let's do that. Yes.
Well, and I'm not beating up not my religious backgrounds. That if you want to be judged, if you don't want to be judged, don't go to church.
Yeah, we've fallen off a little bit. Fallen off
Oh,
a little bit.
all right. But when we talk about non-judgment, can you explain that in its essence? Because I think sometimes we get distorted about what that means. That doesn't mean that we can't really make a call on something, right?
Right, like right and wrong, we gotta do the best we can on that. And still, I think it's we are trying to live righteously, and then it ends up that we are just living in conformity.
Mhm.
And so I think that it goes right back to what you were saying, that this original blessing of our well-being, the original blessing of our nature is still here. And that, they say, the inner life is still alive and shining, in purity. And somehow to get in touch with that, I sometimes say, I want to talk to people who talk to God. I want to talk less to people who talk about God. And so I think there's something in there too. Like, let's support each other in matters of prayer and contemplation, and then begin to listen for, the voice of love and non-judgment that way.
One might argue that your methods are unique. Now, how did you come across what was your journey, your personal journey that brought you
It was
to
it
this?
was a journey of desperation. That's what it was.
We all
I was
been
so
there.
messed up. You know? So, yeah, I was dazed and confused and, not a bad person per se, in terms of breaking law or whatever. But, I did not feel well within myself, and I felt, anxious, depressed, and worried, and just, kind of wondering what the point of it all was. And I felt in the end that my beliefs, even my spirituality, was not making the difference I was looking for. And so I went to clinical psychology school, which is, where many of us go to try to figure ourselves out, with the hope of coming out with something different. And so I did. I began to realize this has something to do with the body, the biology, the physiology. It's got to be in there. And so I really studied deeply, and I did what I call run off and join the somatic circus. And so I jumped from graduate school out into the world of somatics and teaching and learning around the way that our physical system works and operates, and then began to see there is this miracle of messaging coming from inside that says these little messages of hope and help that are coming from our system all the time. So, at any given moment, for instance, we might feel ourselves making this movement. I'm sitting and there's a little rocking from side to side. I'm not doing that rocking per se, yet it is happening. And if I allow that and feel it, there is a feeling somehow of blessing that comes. And that kind of thing that happens everywhere all the time in my images and the sensation of this and in my thoughts. We don't know where it's coming through, and that's why we teach it. We train people to be coaches and to see that kind of thing in somebody, like this gentle rocking from side to side, or a nodding of the head, or a hand that gently touches the side of the cheek, or the sparkle in somebody's eye when they tell a story. And we reflect on that. And that's this innate goodness that is arising, that's unmanufactured. It is not something we try to do, but it is something that arises and is grace. And so that's all we do. We point to the rising of beneficial grace so that the person can be embraced.
When we store memories in our bodies that we don't deal with, we tuck them away. How dangerous is that?
It's almost as dangerous as diving into it and trying to
Mm.
do something with it. That is those states. So this is dude, this is the miracle that we're looking at, that the healing of those states comes around not in the form of their terror. It comes in an opposite form. Like one of the sessions that we look at in the training is a woman who was in the Loma Prieta earthquake out here in California. And that's the earthquake where the freeways, Latin people, it was terrifying. And she had been talking about that, and then we got off on another topic, like how she was playing soccer was striker on Los Lobos team. It's a mixed team and people that had been professional players, in Mexico, and were just the bomb of players. And she was in there, and they got together afterwards for picnics, and went to each other's houses, and celebrated the victories, and complained about the refs. And so there is this joy that began to emerge, and she described being at home in Pleasanton, where the earthquake actually happened. She didn't mention that, but she said, I'd be at home. I was with my kids, and there was a train, train tracks in the backyard, and you'd be on the phone, and you go, just a second, train's going by. She said the whole house would shake. And she just described what in neuroscience is called the retrieval cues of all of the elements of the earthquake. She was at home in Pleasanton with her kids, and the whole house was shaking. But this was the mirror image of that upside down. And the mirror image was, I'm in my home, I'm in Pleasanton, and I was on my phone with my friend, and then the whole house was shaking because that was my train going by. In other words, the trauma is a physiological state, and how it wants to work itself back in is through this mirror image of positive reflection.
That's kind of that's why you know organic intelligence, man.
Yes, yes, yes. That's right.
So so where
As
do
we
you see
all
no
no, I'm just saying that, yeah, I'm the organic intelligence person, as we all are. This is our nature.
yeah, so we see we c- we can't deny that we're living in some difficult times. Challenging
Crazy times. Yes.
some challenging
Yeah,
times.
indeed.
And most people are if they listen to the headlines, they're gonna hear doom, 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 doom. How do
Yes.
you what are you subscribing to people to do to navigate through these waters? And listen, every generation has seasons that they deem to be difficult and hard to overcome. And we've
Truly.
always made it through, right? So
Right?
so this is no different. But
Oh,
what are you saying to people?
well, I feel extremely hopeful, but for no good reason. It's except that I think it's our nature. I think it's our nature to feel hopeful, and I feel vitally engaged in support of people that are struggling, and it is a joy for me every day to see people's lives transformed, to see the smile coming, to see people embracing life in wherever it is. No matter what we have coming down the pipeline, we have each other, and we have our life right now. And so if we can figure out how to celebrate that, then we're going to be able to be okay. And that's what I think we offer. We figured out in organic intelligence how our complex systems or complex biology can feel better. And when we feel better, it's easier to feel hopeful and helpful. And that's what we're offering, is the body, the biology begins to let go of some of the tension, some of the pain, some of the distress, some of the anxiety. I worked with a client this week who had had a heartbeat for like a year and a half that was constantly over 100, constantly over 100. And doctors were concerned. They were trying to give her medications to make that happen. And we'd been working, me and another OI faculty, Amy Summers, been working, doing sessions. And I talked with her this week. She's like, the heart thing is over. It's back to normal, not always, but she said it's back to normal after, this year and a half of the docs, the cardiologist being really worried and her feeling all of that, it came back into rhythm. And that's synchrony. That's biological synchrony where the ups and downs begin to sync up again. And the ups and downs we talked about in terms of like waking and sleeping, but those ups and downs happen all throughout our system. So the heart contracts, and it works, and then it rests. It works, and then it rests. And it's linked to the breath. So we breathe in, and the heart rate is more, and we breathe out, and the heart rate is less. And all of those rhythms of those ups and downs begin to play until it's all in the pocket, and it's back in harmony and synchrony. And that's what we do.
There you have it, everybody. I told you that we sit you at the feet of the masters and we have conversations to help you evolve your life. You've gotten a sneak peek of what organic intelligence is. It is just that it's within inside of you, it's within inside of me. There's no magic wand. There's no big secret. This is truth revealed. My last question, I thought about this. We people are afraid of the spike in food prices and all those other things. And when we talk about the archaic self, they didn't have any fear about pricing because they fish for their own food, right? Maybe now, because we did all of these fears, we'll get back to gardening. We'll get back to doing some of the things that are conducive to bringing organic intelligence. How important is playing in the dirt?
Oh man, I've got my garden going. I'm loving it. The earth will feed us if we're given it a chance. Sidewalk gardens, what if we put out, in the sidewalk, we put out planters and everybody could have some, we could feed each other. Yeah. Do you have time for a story?
Yes,
So
always.
there's the story. The story is the story of the long spoons. You've probably heard it, but a person is sent down to see what hell is like. And here is hell. Hell is this beautiful banquet of food, tables full of delicious and beautiful fruits and vegetables and everything that you could possibly want. And everybody was sitting at the table, but they had these long spoons and they were just long enough. They could fill it up with this beautiful food, but it was so long they could not get it into their mouths. And they were starving and suffering and in misery and hell, taken back up to heaven. Here, the picture, it's the same picture. Long banquet tables filled with beautiful buffet and all the beautiful foods that were healthful and nutritious and delicious, and the same long spoons. Except there, they were feeding each other.
I'm gonna
That's what
use
we
that
call
one.
it. That's for you.
Well, everyone, we all have long spoons. What are we doing with them? And we can't be selfish. And this is why our podcast, Walk in Victory, is important, because stories like these, information that we share here, is helpful to somebody that is listening. So we don't ask you for cash apps, Venmos, or any of those things, but what we do ask is that you hit like, subscribe, and share. And if you're listening on a platform where you can leave a comment, do leave a comment, because those comments help these conversations get to the ears of people. You're feeding with your long spoon. Me and Steve's conversation. All of our guest information is in the description. We also ask that you follow our guests on their social media profiles and all that, like, just so that you can get into that ecosystem. And the more thought leaders that you follow, your algorithm starts to change, and you start to meet more thought leaders and more thought leaders. And social media doesn't have to be a big bed of negativity. So don't walk with your head down. Don't walk making excuses. Steve is now a part of our Walk in Victory family, and we believe in organic intelligence, and together we walk in victory. Don't forget to go check out our website, walkinvictory.me, and also follow me on all social handles. Enjoy the rest of your day. Peace.